My name is William. I thought that although life was hard, I had hope with Jessica by my side. But I didn't expect that all this was just a carefully disguised scam. With Jessica, we lived in a small rental house, ate the cheapest instant noodles, and calculated carefully to save every penny. I always thought that she was just like me, a poor student struggling in the quagmire of life and relying on part-time jobs to make ends meet. That morning, the sun shone sparsely into the rental house. Jessica looked at me pitifully, and her eyes instantly grabbed my heart. William, I can't pay my brother's medical expenses. She was very attractive, with long and thick eyelashes like two small fans. When she fluttered, her pure and bright black eyes seemed to hide the stars and the sea. She looked like someone who couldn't live a hard life with me. She looked like a rich girl who was pampered. In the past, every time she showed this expression, I had no resistance, but this time I was filled with bitterness and helplessness. I calculated in my mind. I had just paid half a year's rent. A few days ago, she needed a high-end computer to do her complicated graduation project. I gritted my teeth and maxed out my credit card again. Now, I only have a pitiful 100 yuan left in my pocket, and the credit card debt is as high as 8,000 yuan. I have to pay nearly 1,000 yuan per month in installments. I don't even have money for dinner tonight. Seeing that I didn't say anything for a long time, Jessica came over gently, hugged me with a lonely look, and rested her chin softly on my shoulder. She said with a bit of grievance and anxiety, "William, have I added too much burden to you? Will you hate me?" In an instant, the original light in her eyes disappeared, and she looked like a kitten abandoned by its owner in the cold wind, listless and pitiful. Looking at her like this, the words, "I have no money," turned around in my throat for several times, but I couldn't say it. Jessica's excellence is obvious to all. In school, her GPA is shockingly high, and she always sits firmly on the throne of the first in the department. Her professional ability is even more impeccable. Before she graduated, a lot of companies were vying to sign her. People like her should be soaring in the wider sky and have a bright future. They should not be like me, trapped in the gutter of life, busy for a meal, with no waves in life, and you could see the end at a glance. I sighed helplessly, reached out, and patted her head gently, trying to force a smile. "Silly, how could I hate you? Don't think about it. How much is the medical expenses?" She hesitated for a long time before spitting out two words, 20,000. Hearing this number, I felt my eyes go dark and my head buzzed. Jessica's brother has always been in poor health and has to be hospitalized every now and then. In the past 3 years, I have worked hard, but the money is like water flowing and I can't save it. Now, let alone 20,000, even 2,000, I can't take it out. Jessica seemed to sense my embarrassment and forced a smile. "Is it very expensive?" "It's okay. Otherwise, I won't treat it for now." As she spoke, she rubbed my face like a spoiled child, and in her crisp voice, she could not hide her sadness. "I could drop out of school to save money first. Maybe then we can work in the same company and go to work together." "Work in the same company as me?" The sarcastic, middle-aged leader of a unit instantly emerged in my mind, thinking of the endless chores, endless overtime, the pitiful salary, the 5 insurances and 1 housing fund that were almost negligible, and the hopeless future. How could I let Jessica fall into such a life? I shuddered all over and blurted out, "You can't drop out of school. But where would the money come from?" I took a deep breath and said calmly, "It's okay. I have money." Back in the house, I sat on the bed for a long time in a daze. The light was dim, stretching my shadow. After a while, I raised my hand to turn on the light, slowly reached out my hand, and took off the delicate and white Hetian jade pendant hanging around my neck. This jade pendant is the only thought my grandma left me. My mother cruelly abandoned us when I was born, and my father was a complete gambler who was away from home all day and ignored me. It was my grandma who raised me with all her hard work. When I was admitted to university, my grandmother was so happy that she even wanted to sell the jade pendant to support my studies. But at that time, my father owed a huge gambling debt and ran away without a trace. The debt collectors blocked my door every day, looking fierce and vicious. Even if I sold the jade pendant, I couldn't keep the money, and it would only be snatched away by those people. In addition, my grandmother was seriously ill and had difficulty moving. How could I leave her alone to study? I will never forget the way my grandma looked before she died. Her hands were so thin that they looked like they would break if bent lightly, but she still held me tightly with her last bit of strength. Tears silently flowed across her wrinkled face, and every ravine seemed like a mark of sadness carved by the years. After a long time, she trembled and put the jade pendant in my hand. Her breath was weak but full of attachment. "William, Grandma can't be with you in the future. Keep this pendant. Look at it when you miss Grandma. Grandma will always be by your side." At that time, I tightly grasped the jade pendant, gritting my teeth to prevent crying for fear of disturbing her. This jade pendant is all that my grandma left me, carrying all my thoughts about her. In the long and difficult years that followed, no matter how hard life was, I never thought of selling the jade pendant. Whenever I felt like I was about to be crushed by the burden of life, I would take out the jade pendant, as if I could see Grandma's gentle eyes and hear her gentle, comforting voice in my ears. "William, don't be afraid. Grandma is here." But now, for Jessica, I have to sell this only thought with my own hands. At night, the rental house was dark. I curled up in a corner, buried my face between my knees, and sobbed silently. I was almost suffocated by the guilt in my heart. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm incompetent. But I really don't want Jessica to be like me, trapped by the shackles of life and lose her bright future." Tears flowed freely, and I didn't know how long I cried. In a half-awake state, I vaguely felt a pair of rough but warm hands gently wiping away the tears on my face, and I seemed to hear Grandma's gentle voice. "William, it's okay. Grandma doesn't blame you." The next morning, I walked into the pawn shop with mixed feelings. The owner looked the jade pendant up and down and was only willing to offer 12,000 yuan at first. I gritted my teeth and chose never to redeem it, and he reluctantly raised the price to 20,000 yuan. Holding the 20,000 yuan, my hands couldn't help shaking. This was not just a sum of money, but also the last bond between me and my grandmother. When I got home, I handed the money to Jessica. Surprise flashed in her eyes, and she looked at me with sparkling eyes. "William, where did you get so much money?" Then, she seemed to realize something, and her expression changed. "You cried. Where did the money come from? Who gave it to you?" I pretended to be relaxed and suppressed my emotions. "Don't worry, I didn't do anything bad. I just sold the jade pendant my grandma gave me." At the end, my voice couldn't help but tremble slightly. Jessica was stunned. At that moment, I seemed to see a trace of complex emotions in her eyes, like touching and faintly mixed with guilt, but it was fleeting. Then, she hugged me suddenly and whispered in my ear, "William, thank you." At that time, I was thinking about her brother's medical expenses and her ability to continue her studies. I didn't have the mind to savor the complexity in her tone. I thought life would continue like this, but after a few days, Jessica said she was going to attend a graduation dinner. However, that night, I called her several times, but no one answered. As the night deepened, my heart tightened, fearing that she would get drunk and have an accident. After a long time, the call was finally connected, but the voice that came was a strange boy with a bit of smile and contempt. "Is it William?" "Sister Jessica drank too much. We are in the 503 private room of Guanlan Restaurant. You couldn't pick her up?" I was stunned for a moment. Guanlan Restaurant is well known in the city. I heard that the average consumption per person is at least several thousand yuan, and only rich and noble people go there. Why would Jessica's classmates choose such a place for a reunion? But I didn't have time to think about it. I hurriedly thanked her, hung up the phone, and took a taxi straight to the restaurant. When I stepped into the restaurant, I was instantly stunned by the scene in front of me. The crystal chandelier, which was more than 10 meters high, emitted a brilliant light, illuminating the entire hall. The decorations around it all showed luxury, and every detail revealed its high value. I had never been to such a high-end place, and I felt cramped instantly. After asking the waiter for the location of the private room, 503, I hurried upstairs. 503, the door of the private room, was ajar. I walked forward and looked inside. I saw a dozen young men and women in gorgeous clothes sitting around a huge round table. They were laughing and chatting, and the atmosphere was very lively. On the opposite side, a boy in a high-end suit was playing with a leather rope in his hand. Hanging on a leather rope was my jade pendant. My steps froze instantly. I have worn that jade pendant for more than 20 years. Even from a distance, I can recognize it at a glance. At this time, it was casually fiddled with by the boy. He raised his head, met my gaze, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. I looked aside, and when I saw Jessica, I almost didn't recognize her. She was sitting at the top, wearing a light golden dress and exuding an innate nobleness. It was still the same familiar face, but at this moment, she was completely different from the girl who shared a bowl of instant noodles with me in the rental house and wore bleached jeans. She was holding a glass of red wine. Her eyelids drooped slightly, and her every move revealed the calmness and indifference of a superior. At this time, others laughed and said, "Jessica, your poor boy really sold the jade pendant just to raise money for your medical expenses." Jessica took a sip of red wine, frowned slightly, looked irritated, and seemed a little impatient with the noise around her. The young woman with silver-dyed hair next to her had a playful look in her eyes and a meaningful smile on her lips. She teased, "Oh, that boy is really devoted to you. He probably never dreamed that these 20,000 yuan is not even enough for a sleeve on your clothes. Jessica, you're not really in love with him, are you?" Jessica heard it and sneered disdainfully, as if she heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. How is it possible? He is nothing but a pastime for me to kill time. As soon as she said this, the man beside her raised his lips elegantly, walked behind her with a smile, and put his hands on her shoulders naturally, with an intimate posture like a couple in love. The man spoke, his voice was a bit coquettish. "Jessica, I like this jade pendant very much. Give it to me." "No, change it." Jessica refused without thinking. But the man did not give up, still smiling and hugging her shoulders, coaxing, "We have known each other for 20 years. Why are you still so distant with me? Could it be?" He deliberately lowered his voice. "Are you really interested in that boy?" Jessica was very annoyed, took another sip of red wine, and then waved her hand impatiently. "Take it if you like it. It's so annoying." The man looked at the jade pendant casually, as if he had found a treasure. A trace of undisguised disgust flashed across his eyes. Just at this moment, he raised his eyes and looked into my eyes through the half-open door. The smile on his lips twisted instantly, and he pulled out a mocking arc with malicious intent and said loudly, "It's really a worthless thing. 20,000 yuan is not even as expensive as a pair of my shoes." As he said that, he loosened his hand, and the jade pendant fell straight to the ground. There was only a crisp sound of snap, and the jade pendant shattered instantly. Oops, my hand slipped. He had a fake smile on his face and deliberately kicked the broken jade on the ground with his foot. While kicking, he looked at Jessica and said hypocritically, "I'm so sorry. Jessica, you won't blame me, right?" Jessica's face turned pale and red, extremely ugly. After a long silence, she said coldly, "It's just a worthless thing. Just ask the waiter to clean it up later. Just throw it away as garbage." Garbage? I just felt my brain go blank. At this moment, no matter how slow I was, I understood everything. Reason told me that I should rush in, beat this man up, and scold him, but my feet seemed to be nailed to the ground, unable to move. I felt a bone-chilling cold all over my body, as if I had fallen into an ice cellar, and it became difficult to breathe. I could only watch the waiter walk up, bend down, pick up the broken jade, and throw it into the trash can. His action was so casual that it seemed like he was throwing away a piece of real garbage, a piece of garbage that was considered worthless like me. I couldn't bear it any longer. The accumulated anger instantly broke through the dam of reason, and I pushed open the door of the box. In an instant, everyone in the room fell silent, and all their eyes converged on me like searchlights. They raised their eyebrows slightly at first, and then understood each other, with expressions of curiosity or disdain on their faces. Just half a second later, someone pointed at me and shouted with a mocking face, "Jessica, your poor boy has come to your door." Jessica obviously didn't expect me to appear suddenly. She stood up in a panic, her eyes dodging, and her voice was a little unnatural. "William, why are you here?" The man who broke my jade pendant, Ryan, sneered and didn't move his hand from Jessica's shoulder. He deliberately straightened his back and looked at me provocatively. "You are William, right? I heard Jessica mention you a long time ago, and you were exactly the same as she described." As he spoke, he looked me up and down, his eyes full of contempt. "You look like a decent person." As soon as these words came out, there were several chuckles from behind. Ryan cleared his throat proudly and said loudly, "Let me introduce you again, Jessica, the daughter of Brilliance Group. I am her childhood friend, Ryan. By the way, my family is in the yacht business. If you have any needs in this area in the future, just come to me." The man who spoke just now couldn't help but be sarcastic again. "Come on, Ryan, you don't even look at the target when you solicit business. I think this gentleman has probably never seen what a yacht looks like. Go to hell." Ryan cursed with a smile, but his eyes were full of arrogance. "This is our Jessica's boyfriend. Let alone a yacht. Even an airplane, he can buy it if he wants." I stood among this group of people who were dressed in fancy clothes and exuded the smell of money. I felt that I didn't fit in. My body began to tremble uncontrollably. My throat seemed to be blocked, and I couldn't say a word. It was as if I was trapped in a terrible nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. After a long time, I slowly clenched my fists, suppressed my anger, looked at Jessica, and said in a trembling voice, "So, you have always been rich, right?" Jessica was still leaning on Ryan, with a slightly smug smile on her face, and said lightly, "It's okay, just average. My company is valued at about hundreds of billions." I lowered my head and used all my strength to try to make my voice sound calmer. "So, there is no brother who needs to be hospitalized and pay medical expenses, right?" As soon as I said this, I suddenly realized it. No wonder every time I said I wanted to visit her brother, Jessica always found various excuses to shirk. It turned out that from the beginning, this was a carefully fabricated lie. "Hey, let me explain this," Ryan said indifferently, laughing heartlessly. "Jessica was always cheated before. We were afraid that she would meet someone who wanted her money again, so we discussed letting her pretend to be poor to test you." He said it lightly, as if it was just a harmless game, a joke that could make people laugh. Jessica held my hand at this time, her eyes sparkling, but with panic and guilt that she herself did not even notice. "William, you passed the test. Are you happy?" I looked at Jessica and pulled out a very weird smile on my face, and the voice seemed to be squeezed out from the teeth. "Yes, I will be your real boyfriend from now on." As I said that, I couldn't help but grin, but that smile was uglier than crying. "I'm so happy." At the moment when everyone was shocked and couldn't close their mouths, my accumulated grief and anger erupted like a volcano, and I suddenly raised my hand, and slapped Jessica's face hard, hitting her whole face to one side. I stared at her, uttering through my teeth, "Jessica, you are a beast." After leaving the box, my anger was still like a surging tide, surging in my heart. Reason told me that it was not worth being so angry for such a woman, but the nights when we slept in each other's arms in the past were constantly playing in my mind like a movie. Jessica once hugged me with sparkling eyes and whispered her love, but now I think it was all fake, just a bad joke she and her childhood friend made. To be honest, I just felt dazed at that moment, and I was full of doubts whether I was still trapped in a nightmare and had not woken up yet. I felt a slow and dull pain in my heart, and after a long time, I numbly accepted this cruel reality. I sold the only precious relic left to me by my relative in the world, but in return I got a farce. And she, after playing such a trick on me, could still ask me shamelessly if I was happy. Jessica ate things without saying a word and threw them at the door. In fact, she didn't have much stuff, just a few pieces of clothing and some messy small items, which might not be worth the corner of her clothes. Among them was an ugly couple mug that I made by myself. I gave it to her as a birthday gift. When she took the cup, she didn't say anything for a long time. I asked her nervously if she didn't like it, and explained that I really had no money and could only make it with my heart. But she smiled and hugged me, saying that she liked it very much. Since then, she has been using this mug. Although this cup is not exquisitely made, it carries my full heart. At this moment, I lowered my eyes and stared at the cups with half a heart painted on each of them. I was silent for a long time, and finally I was cruel and threw it into the trash can. Now I realize that what I thought was true was just a carefully woven pretense. It's really ironic that she, a rich second generation, could pretend for so long, and it was really hard. Jessica downstairs. Her Ferrari roared to the side of the road, and Ryan got out of the car with her. Ryan also naturally held her hand. Before Jessica could speak, Ryan spoke first. William, you've got it. Being with Jessica is a blessing you have cultivated for 8 lifetimes. Why are you pretending to be noble? How could I not see Ryan's feelings for Jessica? He obviously liked Jessica, so he regarded me as a thorn in his side. This so-called test was probably his means. I sneered and responded without showing any weakness. What's between us? What does it have to do with you? What position do you have to say these things to me? Ryan was stunned, and then said, I am her friend. I couldn't help laughing and mocked. The kind of friend who wants to climb into her bed? Ryan's face turned ugly instantly, and Jessica's expression was also a little embarrassed. Jessica said, William, are you serious? I admit that I didn't think it through before. I can compensate you 10 times or 100 times for that jade pendant. The jade is not worth much. I will buy you a better one when the time comes. Isn't that okay? I looked at Jessica and didn't know what to say for a moment. The woman in front of me, whom I have loved for a long time, was so unfamiliar that I was scared. In her eyes, the only relic left to me by my grandmother was just a cheap item that could be measured with money at will, as if it could be easily replaced by spending more money. I suddenly didn't want to say another word to her, because I knew very well that for people like them, it was useless to say more. In their cognition, money is everything and money can measure everything in the world. I pointed to the side and said to her coldly and firmly, Get out. Then I walked to the trash can and threw the bag in my hand into it. The mug rolled out of the bag due to its heavy weight, hit the ground, and instantly broke into 2 halves, making a crisp and harsh sound. Jessica looked at the mug, and her face suddenly changed. You even threw this mug away? I chuckled, my eyes full of disdain, because in my eyes now, it is just like you, garbage. Jessica looked gloomy and stared at me straight. After a long time, she said word by word, Okay, William, don't regret it. I'm waiting for you to come back, crying and beg me. I thought Jessica was just threatening. After all, this breakup was so embarrassing. But the next day, when I arrived at the company, my boss called me into the office to talk to me about leaving. I realized something was wrong. I said anxiously, What did I do wrong? I have been working hard all along. Why are you suddenly firing me? The boss's heavy eyelids slowly lifted, and his eyes swept over me with a little pity, and then they fell down weakly, letting out a long sigh that seemed to penetrate people's hearts. He seemed to have experienced a fierce struggle in his heart, and his hands crossed subconsciously, with a bit of helplessness and apology in his voice. William, you have been out recently. Did you offend some big shots? The higher-ups have directly issued a death order. You must be fired, and you are not allowed to be hired again in the future. I really have no choice. Your work performance has always been very good, but I am just an employee. Considering that I have taken good care of you before, please don't make it difficult for me. Hearing this, I was struck by lightning and froze in place. The first name that flashed through my mind was Jessica. I knew in my heart that only she had this ability, and only she would hate me so much that she would use all kinds of means to try to completely erase everything about me. I knew that it was useless to say more at this moment, and no matter how much I argued, it would not change the established result. So I kept silent, quietly packed up my things, and walked out of the company's door step by step heavy. I suppressed my anger and resentment, took out my phone, and began to send out resumes frantically. However, the reality was like a cold, high wall, ruthlessly shutting me out. As expected, every company that seemed to be interested in hiring me at first would dismiss me with all kinds of inexplicable excuses within a few days. 3 months passed in a flash, and I couldn't even keep a decent job. It was not until then that I really realized that Jessica was serious this time. She was determined to force me into a desperate situation, to make me desperate, to force me to go back to her and admit my mistakes. After all, when has she, a rich girl like her who has always been arrogant and has been held in the palm of everyone's hand since childhood, ever suffered such an injustice as being slapped in the face in public? She naturally wanted to get back at me. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. I had naively thought that after being together for so many years, she would still remember our old relationship. At this moment, memories of the past flooded into my mind like a tide. We used to live in a small rental house, and our lives were extremely poor. In the most difficult times, we could only share a pack of braised beef noodles. There was no pot to cook the noodles, so we soaked them in hot water and ate with relish, our heads put together. At that time, she had no income, and I earned very little money, and I was full of indebtedness to her. I often looked up and asked her nervously, "Will it taste bad?" She always smiled and touched me with her head and said gently, "How could it be? As long as I'm with you, everything tastes good." At that time, I was thinking about working hard to make her live a good life. I felt that it was because of my incompetence that she suffered. I try my best. As long as she asked for something, I would agree without hesitation. Looking back now, I am afraid that even if she asked me to sell blood for money, I would do it without hesitation. I finally understand that true love is that even if you try your best, you still feel that you have not given enough. But what about her? Jessica has never had a trace of love for me from beginning to end. In her eyes, I may just be an alien who has never appeared in her life, just a toy she likes to kill time. She is with me, but she looks down on me from the bottom of her heart, treating me as the protagonist of a farce, looking down on me and enjoying myself while struggling in the predicament. Thinking of this, my heart felt like being stabbed by countless needles. The pain was unbearable. Not only was I saddened by the ugly truth of my relationship over the past 2 years, but I was also saddened by my current powerlessness. With nowhere else to turn, I had no choice but to work in a KTV. Surprisingly, this KTV has kept me, and more than half a month has passed, and there is no intention of firing me. Here, I have multiple jobs, both as an accountant and a waiter, and sometimes I have to order songs for customers. There is no way. With my education, I am lucky to have a place to stay under Jessica as suppression. I don't want to work in such a place from the bottom of my heart, but in order to survive, I have no choice. However, fate always seems to play tricks on people. Less than a month into my job, I froze in place when I pushed open the door of a private room with a fruit plate in my hand. In the room, Jessica and her group of friends were sitting on the sofa, laughing and talking. Ryan was sitting next to her. When he saw me, he smiled with contempt and provocation. "Long time no see." The group of friends around Jessica burst into sharp and piercing laughter the moment I stepped into the room. The laughter was like a bunch of poisoned steel needles, ruthlessly piercing my tattered self-esteem. "Jessica, look, isn't this your former boyfriend who is penniless? How come he has fallen to the point of serving fruit plates here? Your family is rich enough to rival a country. If you let a little money slip through your fingers, it would be enough for him to squander for several lifetimes. How can you be so hard-hearted and not care about our old friendship?" I stood there in a daze, like a weed that was shattered by a storm, hoping that Jessica would give me a look that showed even a hint of warmth. However, she was like a cold marble statue, lazily sinking into the soft sofa, her eyes wandering aimlessly, and from beginning to end, she was stingy in giving me even a glance from the corner of her eye. If it were in the past, with my hot temper, I would have thrown the fruit plate in my hand at their ugly faces full of ridicule and contempt without hesitation, so that they would understand what the most basic respect is. But in the past 3 months, the ruthless hand of life has pressed me firmly in the quagmire of fate, rubbing me repeatedly. How can I dare to hope to keep a little temper? For 3 whole months, my source of income was completely cut off, and the rent was like a heavy yoke, which made me breathless. Every day, I was like a frightened bird, hiding from place to place, trying my best to avoid the landlord's collection. But fate always seems to like to play tricks on people. Sometimes, even if I am careful, I will still be blocked by the landlord. At that time, I could only kowtow, say all the good words, and beg him to give me a few more days. When I had no money, I could only go to the market to buy the cheapest steamed buns. I often had to eat 2 dry buns a day. Whenever I was choking and almost suffocating, I could only run to the toilet, turn on the faucet, take a few gulps of ice-cold tap water, and force the dry food down. People who have never experienced poverty can never understand the pain that goes deep into their bones. Poverty is like an endless, incurable nightmare that gnaws at your soul mercilessly every minute and every second, leaving you no peace for a moment. I gritted my teeth. A strong smell of blood gradually rose in my mouth, and I moved to their front step by step, as if walking on thin ice. I suppressed the humiliation and anger in my heart, slowly bent down, and gently placed the fruit plate on the table. My throat seemed to be tightly strangled by an invisible big hand. It took a lot of effort to squeeze out a sentence from between my teeth. Dear guest, I hope you have a good time. At this moment, Ryan, like a wolf waiting for an opportunity, stood up suddenly with a glass of wine in hand and deliberately rushed straight towards me. The glass of wine was like a black waterfall, pouring onto his suit, instantly leaving a large and shocking dark stain. You blind thing, do you know how much my suit is worth? Ryan was furious, roaring at the top of his voice, and the sound made my eardrums hurt. Then, he raised his hand and slapped me mercilessly. This slap was like a heavy hammer, hitting my face hard. My head buzzed, half of my face suddenly felt hot and painful, and my ears were buzzing, and I could hardly hear the sound around me. 98,000. Even if you work hard here for a year, you can't afford such a piece of clothing. He looked contemptuous, with his nose turned up, as if I was the most humble person in the world. This slap instantly ignited the powder keg in the private room. The noise and shouting of the crowd rose and fell, as if we were in a chaotic madhouse. The manager heard the noise and hurriedly pushed the door open with a sullen face. Like an angry bull, he glared at me and roared loudly. William, what on earth are you doing? You don't know any rules at all. Why don't you apologize to the customer? I slowly stood up and subconsciously cast my eyes on Jessica. There was still a faint hope in my heart, hoping that she would remember the past friendship and speak up for me. However, she just stared coldly at my swollen cheeks, frowned slightly, and in a flash, a playful sneer appeared at the corner of her mouth. That smile was like ice and snow in the cold winter, which instantly made my heart fall into the bottomless abyss. What are you looking at me for? William, do you still wish that I would stand up for you? 98,000 yuan, for those rich kids who live a life of luxury and spend money like water, is just a piece of clothing that they can get at hand and don't care about. But for me, it is an astronomical figure that is out of reach and a heavy burden that makes me breathless. At the beginning, Jessica told me with tears in her eyes that her brother's medical expenses were still 20,000 yuan short. I had no choice but to sell the only relic left to me by my grandmother, the precious jade pendant. Now, the jade pendant is no longer there. How can I repay this huge compensation of 98,000 yuan? There is no surveillance installed in this private room. They are numerous and powerful, and they all have complicated power relationships behind them. Even if I talk my mouth off, who would be willing to believe me, a worthless poor boy? In an instant, despair was like a surging tide, completely drowning me. I only felt that the strength in my body seemed to be drained in an instant. My brain was blank, and I could only stand there blankly, like a lonely ghost abandoned by fate. How about this? Ryan's eyes rolled around, and a sly smile appeared on his face, like a fox who had succeeded in his trick. He pointed at a row of expensive foreign wines on the table and said maliciously, "You drink all these bottles of wine, and I will let this matter go today. Just think of it as my generosity and let you go. Otherwise, you can wait for the court's summons. I stared blankly at the row of wine bottles with a cold luster. I knew clearly in my heart that I was allergic to alcohol. As long as I touched a little alcohol, my whole body would immediately be covered with dense rashes, itching unbearably and painfully. Jessica knew this weakness of mine, but she was like an indifferent bystander. From beginning to end, she did not say a word to defend me. Time seemed to freeze at this moment, and the air became so heavy that it was almost impossible to breathe. After a long time, I reached out my hand, tremblingly, and slowly picked up the bottle of wine. The pungent wine poured down my throat like a blazing fire snake, burning my internal organs all the way. I was choked and my face turned red. Tears and snot rushed out uncontrollably, and I coughed desperately. But in return, the people around me laughed even more unscrupulously and harshly. Just when I was almost completely swallowed up by despair and fell into despair, a white and slender hand suddenly appeared in front of me. I slowly raised my head and saw Jessica standing in front of me with a look of arrogance. "William, as long as you bow your head and apologize to me, we could be reconciled." Her voice was cold and unquestionable. Hearing her words, a complex emotion suddenly surged in my heart, like a bottle of 5 flavors overturned: sweet, sour, bitter, spicy, and salty, all kinds of tastes intertwined. Once, I was open-hearted to this woman and loved her with all my strength, but now, she trampled on my dignity so ruthlessly. I stared at her and was about to speak, when the door of the private room was suddenly pushed open with a bang, and a young woman in a delicate suit and elegant temperament walked in with a confident step. She looked around the chaotic scene in the private room with a sharp gaze, and finally locked her eyes on me, with a subtle flash of surprise in her eyes. "Are you William?" Her voice was clear and firm. I nodded subconsciously. "I'm Sophia, the planning director of Xingyao Media. I just heard the noise outside. I think you have a unique charm and perseverance. Our company is currently preparing a new inspirational reality show, and I would like to invite you to join." As she spoke, she elegantly handed me a gold-stamped business card. I held the business card tightly, and an indescribable excitement surged in my heart. I could hardly believe my ears. Xingyao Media is well known in the industry. To get such an opportunity is like a person who has been groping in the dark for a long time, suddenly seeing a dazzling ray of hope. Jessica, Ryan, and others were stunned. Obviously, they did not expect such a dramatic turn of events. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, put the unfinished wine in my hand heavily on the table, then turned around slowly and looked at Jessica with a firm gaze. "Jessica, everything in the past has become history. I will no longer pay for your mistakes and willfulness." After saying that, I turned around resolutely and walked out of the private room with big strides without looking back. The next day at dawn, when the sky was just turning pale, I got up early and came to the building of Xingyao Media with a complex feeling of nervousness and expectation. Looking up at the magnificent building towering into the sky, I took a deep breath, mustered up the courage to step into the door. Sophia had been waiting there for a long time. When she saw me coming, she instantly smiled enthusiastically and came to greet me quickly. "You are here, come with me." She led me to the conference room and introduced the specific content of the program to me in detail. It turned out that this is a counterattack program tailored for ordinary people who are in trouble but still have a burning dream. The program team will provide participants with all-round resource support, from the careful guidance of professional mentors to the careful arrangement of various practical opportunities. As I listened, I kept nodding, and the fire of hope in my heart, which was suppressed by life and was dying, was burning again at this moment, and it was burning more and more. After listening to the introduction, I secretly vowed to seize this hard-won opportunity and do my best to rewrite my own destiny. After the program recording officially started, I was like a fully wound spring, not daring to slack off for a moment. In every training class, I was fully focused, like a seedling after a long drought, greedily absorbing knowledge. I stared at the instructor without blinking, for fear of missing any key details. From the complex and numbing business negotiation skills to the creative and unique planning scheme conception, I devoted myself to every content. In the simulated business negotiation session, facing strong opponents, I relied on the courage and wisdom accumulated in the hardships of life, argued with reason, and successfully reversed the unfavorable situation again and again. In the creative planning task, I cleverly integrated my unforgettable suffering experience to create a series of eye-catching and soul-touching schemes. As the program progressed, my efforts and persistence gradually paid off. I went from being an unknown little character to becoming the focus of the program. The audience was deeply moved by my story and impressed by my tenacity. Their eyes were focused on me, and letters and messages of support poured in like snowflakes. My popularity also soared like a rocket. Many well-known companies saw my potential and took the initiative to contact me, offering olive branches and expressing strong intentions to cooperate. Among the many cooperation opportunities, I carefully selected some projects with great development potential, and with full enthusiasm, I resolutely embarked on my own entrepreneurial journey. The road to entrepreneurship was far more rugged and bumpy than I expected. At first, the shortage of funds was like a ferocious and brutal roadblock, blocking my way forward. In order to raise funds, I ran around, shuttled through various entrepreneurial financing activities, and explained my project ideas to investors over and over again. I was repeatedly rejected, but I never thought of giving up. After finally solving the funding problem, the loss of talent became a new thorny problem. Some employees chose to leave because they could not bear the huge pressure of starting a business. But I was not defeated by these difficulties. I relied on the extensive network of contacts I accumulated in the program to find like-minded partners everywhere. I used the management experience I learned from the program to retain talents. After countless days and nights of hard work, my company finally got on the right track, and the scope of business continued to expand. From the initial small-scale development to the current emerging in the industry. During a grand business event, fate arranged for me to meet Jessica again. She was completely different from what I remembered. The once radiant and breezy daughter of a wealthy family now looked like a frost-bitten eggplant, listless and depressed. The poor management of the family business had made her lose her former pride and confidence, and she looked haggard and downcast. When she saw me, a complex light flashed in her eyes, with surprise, regret, and a hint of expectation. She hesitated for a long time before slowly walking towards me. Just as she was about to speak, I took the lead and said, "Jessica, let the past be forgotten forever. Now, I have my own new life and thriving career. I hope you can find your own happiness. I wish you good luck." After that, I turned around and strode away without stopping. The sun poured on me, outlining a dazzling outline. I knew that it was my bright future waving to me enthusiastically. Time flows slowly, passing by like a fleeting moment. With my unremitting efforts, the company has continued to grow and develop, and gradually become a leading enterprise in the industry. I have also completely transformed from a poor boy who was once bullied and worthless to a highly respected and admired business elite. Looking back on those dark and painful past years, I feel a lot of emotion in my heart. Those setbacks and tribulations seem to be the harsh difficulties of fate to me, but in fact they are the raging fire that tempers me. It is these that make me stronger and more resolute. There may still be storms on the road ahead, but I am no longer afraid, because I firmly believe that as long as I always stick to this effort and persistence, I will definitely be able to write a more brilliant and glorious chapter in my life, and let my name be engraved in this world with a deep mark that belongs to me alone.